Okay, well, I was working in my area, like I usually do, and the group leader was pressuring us. I was working on a machine that I don't usually use. So she came over and said to me, I want you to move over to machine 19. I want you to work faster over there because the material needs to be produced urgently. There was a new guy there and he didn't work very quickly. So then I moved over and stayed working on that machine. I moved over around 11 p.m. and by 2:30 in the morning, the accident had occurred. I was working, putting the pieces into the machine as usual. Like I explained to you, I have to put my hands inside the machine to put the piece in place. So I had my hands inside the machine and I was just situating the metal piece over the screws because you have to push it so that it clicks into place. So my hands were in front of me inside of the machine and it got me more on one hand and less on the other. But I had my hands in front of me inside the machine when the machine fell on top of them. So they moved us because they needed more of that product. That's the way it works. The person who works the fastest is moved to wherever the material most urgently must be produced. It was a different type of work. It was a different television model. The piece I was working on was a flat surface, like a tablet, sort of like a tabletop. And the machine takes that smooth piece, and then when it's pressed and you pull it out, it has edges and holes cut into it. So there's lots of different models. The machines all do different things, and so every different machine makes a different television model. Other machines are easier to work on. The one that I normally am on is easy, and this one was very difficult because you had to put the piece in perfectly centered, because if it wasn't well over the screws, then it wouldn't assemble correctly. So no one liked to work on that machine because everyone thought it was too difficult. So they would always put me there. Whenever that model needed to be assembled, they would always put me on that station. Other workers didn't like it. They asked another coworker to go there, and she refused. The machine was really difficult to work with. We had assembled that model many times, and so I had practice on that machine. But the problem is that you don't have a regular spot. They rotate you. They want you to learn everything. There are only a few machines, about 10 of them, but they want you to learn every single model. So you get compensated the same no matter what you do. Work more, work less, assist, everyone gets paid the same. And so no one likes to work on that machine. They don't like being there. But I felt like I had to be there because the leader came, move over to that machine. And I didn't want to leave my regular station, but I'm working and that's what I'm there for. It's part of my job. So I moved. So after the accident, they stopped the assembly line on the female side. It's divided so that there's a line of all women. And so the men continued working. When the machine fell on top of my hands, it was so heavy. I just stayed there. They couldn't lift it up. It was so heavy. And so I was stuck for 10 minutes until they were able to lift it up. It was so heavy. They lifted it up just a little tiny bit. And then I was able to sort of pull my hands out from under the machine. There was a nurse on duty for the night shift, and she said, well, take her up to the infirmary. But I said, what are they going to do for me at the infirmary? I didn't want to go there. So the rest of the coworkers brought a stretcher over so that I could lay down. And one of them finally said, look, I'll take you to the Social Security clinic. None of my supervisors or group leaders did anything. It was really only my coworkers who were courageous enough to say, look, what are they going to do for you here? Come on, we'll take you. And so then the nurse went with us. In the car, the nurse said, well, we'll take you to the general hospital or to the Red Cross. And I said, no, I don't want to go there. That's why I have insurance, so that I can go to the Social Security clinic. So my bosses didn't go, no one, just the nurse. So I left with my coworkers in a car, the young man who was helping me, and it was a little car, and we all got in, and the nurse got in. And once we got to the Social Security clinic, they just dropped me off and they went back to work. So I begged one of my coworkers to please call my family and let them know. I gave him the phone numbers and asked them to call because they had no idea. So I really tried to control myself. I didn't want to panic or get too scared because I already knew that if I passed out, I wouldn't know where they would take me. I mean, if I was unconscious, they could take me anywhere. So I tried to control myself. That was my greatest fear, that if I lost consciousness, I wouldn't know where they would take me. So I thank God. I mean, He's the one that helped me stay strong. It was my faith that pulled me through. I wasn't bleeding very much because the machine actually sealed the ends of my arms to the piece of metal that was in the machine. So the top of the machine was covering my hands, and I had my hands just stuck to the metal piece that was inside. So that's the way they took me to the hospital. I mean, I was just stuck to the metal, and I kept saying, please, take it off, take it off. And they didn't want to do that. So the doctors were really surprised when I showed up with this piece of metal still attached to my hands. Where I was bleeding was here at the top of my arms because from the pressure of the machine, it was breaking my skin open here and here. And so that was where I was bleeding. And so the nurse, as we were leaving, had put a little gauze over my hands. I mean, that was all. She just wrapped a little gauze and off we went. No one thought of taking a picture. I mean, everyone was so scared. Everyone was yelling and running and trying to help. And so no one thought of that at that moment. My hands were stuck over that piece of metal and crushed in the machine. I mean, smashed. I'd had some fabric gloves on, and they stayed in the machine. So at the Social Security clinic is where they cut my hands off. I mean, they looked at them and they could see where it had been damaged. And I assumed that they took x-rays to see how badly it had been hurt and where they needed to cut off. So by then, I didn't really know what was happening. I would imagine, though, that they just needed to see at what part, because this one was at my wrist and this one was a little higher because there was just nothing left of my hands. So they were just crushed. I mean, like flattened tortillas. So you can imagine that if the machine is big enough to cut metal, what would it do to bone? It was so heavy. I mean, it must have weighed about a ton. I don't know, maybe even 1 or 2 tons. It's so heavy. So I arrived at the hospital on Sunday at dawn and stayed there Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday around 1, I went home. So first, I'd like to thank you guys for coming all the way over here to worry about my problem. And secondly, I hope you're going to be able to do something so that the factory will stop these accidents, because I know I'm not the first. A lot of accidents have occurred, and the injustice is the only thing that remains. I mean, I'm just one more. And for them, to them, nothing happens. The truth is, they need to do something about this, about the ongoing accidents. I'm sure you can imagine how sad the situation is. For me, I can only ask that if someone of compassion is out there who can help me get prosthesis that actually move, that would help me a great deal, because I can't do very much on my own. I can do 1 or 2 small things, but really, the way I am now, I can't do anything. I can't even take a shower. Personally, I can't do anything. I can't do anything for myself.